Been a minute, and you have been sorely missed.
Oh wow, thank you, Juan. I missed you guys too.
You are so welcome, and we're so glad to hear about the birth of your first grandchild.
Yay, Ava.
All right, okay.
Ava darling. That's what
Ava
I call
darling. Okay, gotta remember that.
her.
So we here with the Mastermind TP. How you doing, brother?
All's well, all's well.
And we have our guest on, Dr. Lamar Renee Spencer. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so very much for having me back on. As always, it's a treat.
You know, it's always a pleasure.
Yes, it is.
So last week we were talking about manipulation, and I asked the question: are women conditioned for manipulation? And we kind of ended up by asking the question, um, not necessarily asking the question, but I guess the different forms of manipulation, right? I think
Mhm.
men are manipulated one way. Women, I think, a little bit different. I think it's emotional manipulation for women. Yeah, because so many women you hear talk about how they feel about something, right? Um, Feelings seem to have a huge impact on women and how they perceive things, how they respond to things. Um, it just seems that, and we're talking about women who have, postgraduate degrees, right? Very intelligent women, but feelings seem to override that sometimes. And I guess it happens, you know, with all of us. But women, I think it's a little bit deeper. You know, for most men, right? You don't find too many men who are willing to give their freedom for a woman. And I'm talking about being incarcerated.
Mhm.
But you will find women who have gone to jail for men.
Mhm.
Like the police will approach her and say, hey, we're not necessarily looking for you. And I mean, we have examples of that. We want to know about him and his activity.
Mm.
And you have so many women who will say, no, that's my man. I got to be down for him.
Mm.
It happens, right? To the
Yeah.
point that some women are doing 10, 20 years
Mm.
and more in prison rather than tell on this man, right? And I think it's maybe an emotional form of manipulation.
Mhm.
Would you agree with that?
I agree, 100%.
Renee, what do you think?
It is, but like we were saying the other day, I said, well, again, just to kind of piggyback when we were talking earlier, I said, now I have to go on therapy. I mean, I was joking, but I wasn't, right? Because it is manipulation, and we don't always like to look at it as being as manipulation, but it can be, and it's not just from like being in a relationship, but it could be even with your family, right? You could be manipulated and not even realize it until someone like you come along, and now it's a question mark. You're like, darn it, I'm a victim here.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
and the thing about it is, when it comes to manipulation, I always say this, right? It doesn't matter if you graduated cum laude, summa cum laude, you got on the wall and all that. It doesn't matter. You can have someone come off them streets who has never passed the third grade and will manipulate you.
Well, here's the question I have.
Uh
Or
huh.
one of the questions I have. I hear women use terms like mind games, right? Give me an example, and I'm asking this to both of y'all. Give me an example of what's a mind game that a man would play on a woman.
Well, I don't call them mind games. I
Okay.
have another word.
Okay,
Or
what's your
another,
word?
I say Jedi mind tricks.
Okay,
That's what
okay,
I say.
okay,
And then I remind them that I'm a Jedi.
okay.
So it doesn't work.
Right.
But I think the games that they play are, especially when you look at women who are doing time for men.
Mhm.
They're selling this whole presentation on looking for a rider, and a woman is supposed to, if you really love me, then you're gonna ride for me.
Mhm.
And I'm riding, but not to the jail.
Not that hard.
I'm not. No, I'm not riding to the jail.
Right. No, I hear you. I hear
So
you.
I think that's one of the biggest presentations that they make. when trying to manipulate a woman is that whole rider thing, because that encompasses so much. Going to jail for somebody, financially taking care of them, in their quote unquote bad times, right? How long is your bad time?
Right.
I think that it just encompasses so much that's the biggest thing that they use. That they're looking for somebody to have their back. And now in our community, what they're saying is that I'm looking for a woman that's going to have my back, and that's why we with other nationalities, other races, because those women will do that. They will, offer the $250,000 to go start their business. They will take care of them indefinitely. They're doing it. And
But it seems like black women do that too.
No, but black women are starting to wake up.
Okay.
Yeah, black women are starting to wake up. So we can't take that away from them.
Okay.
It's not the same as it was 15 and 20 years ago. Black women are now, first of all, they're the largest percentage of the educated population is black women. So it's impossible to reach that level of education and to not transcend somewhat.
But
right?
you know something? Like when she mentioned summa cum laude, magna cum laude. Okay, now there is book smart, and then there is street smart. Right? And you could be, you can have a doctorate, but if you know nothing about the game and how it's played, right, just out of your league. And what I hear from women, and it seems like there are so many nonverbal cues that has an emotional impact. Okay, so if a woman enters a room, let's say she's going out on a date, right? And she enters the room. Let's say they're going to meet at a restaurant. She enters the room. And if the man's reaction isn't what she hoped for, right, then automatically she begins to feel some sort of way. And now, if you're on a date with a person you're not too familiar with, you don't know their typical reaction, right? But if the reaction doesn't fit, I guess, what she sort of envisioned, then she begins to feel a certain way, right? I think that women are sensitized to that, whereas maybe we're not necessarily in the same way. You know what I mean? And especially nowadays, our generation, you had to dress up if you were going out. Nowadays, you see people going out. I mean, I see guys don't comb their hair, pants falling off their behind. Our generation was a big thing with your sneakers. You kept them clean, right? Nowadays, you see crud on them, and yet you still see a woman on their own, right? Something that is very different from when we were growing up. But for women, it seems that you go out and you want to look your best and you want a certain reaction. It's like, when a woman gets married, she said, I want every eye to be on me, right? This is my time, my day. And if she doesn't get that reaction, it seems as if it has an emotion. She has an emotional response. Would you agree with that?
Somewhat, a little bit. I can remember when I got married, I had this thing in my head where I thought, the first marriage, I didn't have a big wedding. Second marriage, I had a huge wedding, right? So, and I remember all these weddings that I saw where the groom cried when the bride walked in. And so I was anticipating, you got the prize, bro. You better be boo-hooing. But he didn't cry. And I remember, instead of us talking about something else on the wedding night,
right?
The whole topic of discussion was, how come you didn't cry? And I can't. And he's like, and I had to really think about it and say, that's not who he is to cry. So what I heard and what you asked me was, you said, if it's like a first date and you really don't know him, you don't know how he responds, right? And so I went based on men that I saw cry, not considering the person that I was marrying. And that really wasn't who he was to cry. He cried if it was just us.
Right.
He'd cry all day if it was
Right.
just us. But like in front of everybody, he wouldn't cry. He'd hold it in. And so, to answer your question, I think that in most cases, I don't care. In most cases, I'm that confident person where, I know I look, but then sometimes, sometimes the vulnerability piece comes in,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it's not that you don't know, maybe it's just that you want the validation from that person
Mm-hmm.
that you care about or the person that you love, you're just looking for,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. And I think that could that lead to manipulation? Whereas you're constantly looking for validation, right?
Mhm.
And well, I keep demanding more and more in order to get validation.
If you have to keep looking for validation
Mm-hmm.
and it gets to the point where you need to manipulate because you crave validation
Mm-hmm.
like that, I hate to say it, but you might fit into that little narcissistic category,
Mm-hmm.
and you might be struggling with some self-esteem issues where you constantly need somebody to validate.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably be reminding that woman that, there's this term called self-esteem, esteem yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so maybe you need to go sit with yourself for a little while and discover your radiant beauty and, learn to love yourself. But if it gets to that point, you don't need to maybe be in that relationship.
But it seems that that is a constant thing, right? Where women will talk about the fact that they didn't get the validation that they wanted. They didn't get the attention that they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, you know, time flies, right? You've been in a relationship 2, 3 years, and I guess it's non satisfactory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yet you stay hoping that, oh, well, things are going to change, right? If I say go get a BBL,
Mm.
right? If I do this, if I do that, things will change. He will finally recognize me and see me and give me the validation, right? Um, that seems to be, like a somewhat of a repeat theme that you hear from women. And when I say that, right, there are things that I think are, no, I should say I know, are uniquely female, right? How many guys do you know are suffering from anorexia or bulimia?
Mm. I don't know.
You don't, right?
Mm-mm.
And that is something that happens, particularly to young women, right? Who have to maintain this particular body style, this particular body shape,
Mhm.
right? In order to be considered attractive or sexy. And they get to the point where they just stop eating. The only guys I know that are in that situation, and it's not anorexia bulimia, they just lost their job. You know
So
what I
funny.
mean? And they can't afford to go out and buy food. But that is something that appears to be uniquely female, right? And it's something that young women seem to strive for, right? What is that about?
What, striving to just change everything to be
Well,
to make him more interesting?
yeah, I mean, like the whole thing of going to the point of just to stop eating, right?
For him?
Well,
Is this for him, or
but
is
is
this
it?
because or does this just go back to what I just said about you needing to discover your own radiant beauty and your
Mhm.
own self-worth? Like, how can somebody else love you if you don't love yourself, right?
But so I'm going to ask this to you and to Renee, right? Is it him or is it within her? Because a lot of times you hear women, right, when they're talking about their relationship, a lot of this they say they focus on what he didn't do,
Mm-hmm.
what he didn't show me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the response is, well, he says, I'm overweight, so let me stop eating, right? Or is it what he says, or is it your own perception?
Mm.
Where does that come from?
I think that, and I'm gonna just talk for a moment and then let Renee jump in. But I think that for a woman, right, if you already don't feel good about yourself,
Mhm.
you could be the perfect size. But the energy that you give off is kind of what people see. And men are visual. Yes, you guys are visual. But if what they see is sexy, things are not what they used to be, where, especially our men. Our
Mhm.
men are not looking at size 5 women anymore.
I don't think we
Our
ever
men,
did.
well, it was a time where black women wanted to be really thin. They thought that was the end thing. That's what they were showing us, right?
Mhm.
Now everybody wants to be full figured and voluptuous, so to
Mhm.
speak. So you could be full figured and have no self esteem and don't feel good about yourself, and so you have no sex appeal, right?
Mhm.
And then you could take somebody else who's maybe a dress size bigger than you, but when she enters the room with all the sex appeal, right? And men skip over you, who may have a much better figure, for the person that's a dress size larger, because her whole persona, the essence of who she is sexy,
Mhm.
right? So I think it's some of her, how she's feeling about herself. It's not all him.
Mhm.
He may say it, and then, but it's based on what's already there.
Mhm.
Like, so, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So I don't think. What do you think, Renee?
We lost Renee.
Oh, we lost Renee.
Oh. Okay.
Oh.
So I was kind of curious about that because I hear most of my friends are female, and when you talk to them, you hear some repeat themes, right? And one of them is, when you talk about the things that they don't get from the relationship, right? And it's like they want to place the blame solely on him, when I think a lot of it is per their own perception. I think pop culture and just the societal pressures that are put on women, well, that of course is going to be part of the relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember years ago, yeah, the models were rail thin, and they are today, right? Um, but I guess for the past maybe 15, 20 years, you've seen something new called plus size models, right? Because all women are not going to be a size 2, right? So I guess that was an outlet for women to feel good about themselves, women who were, voluptuous, shall we say, right? But I don't know how that relates to a man, right? I mean, is it a man behind the camera snapping the pictures? Yeah, right. But is it he that's putting the pressure on her? Is it society, right? Is it familial? Because um, sometimes within the family structure, there's certain expectations put on women, right? You got to look a certain way. Your hair has to be a certain way. You have to dress a certain way. So when you bring that into a relationship, right, should the finger be pointed at him solely?
Well, first of all, women are gonna get mad at me because lately, I think the older I get, the more mature I get. I think I'm leaning toward siding with the men more these days.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. The ladies are gonna get mad at me. I think that we need to come up, right? And we need to take ownership of some stuff. And maybe one of the things that we need to take ownership of is the fact that, is it really our men who are making us feel like we need to look this way or look that way? Or is it, no pun intended to any other culture, or is it the European culture who presents this size 6 and size 5 woman, right? And say this is what beautiful looks like. And that's not us. Right. And so, but when you love yourself, right, and you look at yourself and then you assess what's going on in the real world, you discover that they're going to pay to try to look like us.
Right.
Right. They're going to get the BBLs and the boob jobs and the lips, the full lips, and now they got fillers for the cheekbones, and I mean, you name it, they have it to try to give themselves, you know, a blacker look. Sorry to say it like that.
No, I get it.
So I think that we have to take ownership of that and say that we're going to start to just be who we are and say this is who we are. We did it with the hair, right? So now everybody's natural. And if you notice, I'm hearing people, women of color now, they're saying they're going back to the chemicals, like, oh, it was too hard. And so I had to say to a relative of mine, is it really too hard? And is everyone going back? Or is it just that they're showing us that so that we do go back? So we think everybody's doing it.
You know, I think
Renee's back.
And okay. Renee, you with us?
Yes, sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right. Did you hear the question that I had for Romane?
No, I'm sorry. My Wi-Fi went out. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. What I guess what we were talking about was, I guess it's a level of self-esteem, right? That either you have it or you don't. And I think that a lot of times, well, I shouldn't say a lot, at least sometimes, women expect men to provide that level of self-esteem, right? And I think it's something you have to have naturally, right? Because if you don't, you're going to go from one person to the other trying to find validation, right? So I guess the question I'm asking is, should the finger be pointed at the man, or is it partially her perception of herself that causes her to have a lack of self-esteem?
Good question. I mean, it could be both, I think. You know, and the reason why I say both is, like, for instance, a lot of times we self-sabotage ourselves based on what we see, right? We think that, I don't know, the person with the BBLs, the person with the long tresses, the person with the long eyes, that's considered beautiful. And it may not. I think beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I think we self-sabotage ourselves based on what we consider to be beautiful. Do you remember years ago when you go into the stores, all the mannequins were like Barbie? Now when you go in there, they're a lot larger, right?
And we were just talking about that, that over the last maybe 15, 20 years, you see plus size models, right?
Yes.
Because all women do not fit into that package, right? Of the, the waif look, size 0, size 2. And we're talking about how, you rarely, I shouldn't say really, I don't know any man or male who suffers from anorexia or bulimia, right? That seems to be something that tends to affect younger women, right? Whose self-esteem is, for whatever reason, diminished to the point where, they simply stop eating. To the point where they have to be hospitalized and basically force fed. I mean, it's really a sad situation, that it goes that far. You know what I mean? And I think that maybe that is a form of manipulation that doesn't necessarily come from men, right? I think it's maybe society.
Yeah.
Makes them say, I need to fit into this mold, right? I need to be able to put on, this pair of jeans that's a size 1, right?
But Ron, it's important. Just, this is for the guys. This is important. The ladies have to acknowledge this. So if he marries you and you're a size 7, right? And 10 years in, you're a size 24, and he says you gained too much weight, you got to kind of own that. So not saying feel less than about yourself, but own the fact that you are not the person that he married. And you can't blame that much of a weight gain on children. You can't blame, you have to acknowledge that maybe, you slipped up a little bit, right? And then make a conscious decision about whether or not you want to start to work on your body for yourself.
And I was going to say, don't do it for him. Do it for
Yourself.
the fact that you have children. You want to be around
Yes.
to have maybe see grandchildren,
Yes.
right? So,
but don't get mad at him because he's now telling you that he's not attracted to you like that anymore. Because at the end of the day, that's not the woman that he married.
right. And a lot of women are going to disagree with you completely.
I don't care.
No, I get it, right? But, you know, a question that is often asked of men, right? Do you think I gained some weight? And for most men, we tiptoe around that question. Why? Because if you are completely honest, and a lot of people say, you know, I want you to be honest. But if you are honest, right? Sometimes there's going to be some blowback, right? Sometimes she just going to stop talking to you, right? Oh, you think I'm fat now? Well, I mean, personally, I don't think you should ask a question that you're not ready for the answer to, right? But that does happen quite often, you know. How do you think this looks on me?
Do you really want to know?
Right. Do you want me to tell you the truth, right? And
never ask Craig.
Because he's going to be brutally honest, right? And, you know, sometimes you have to be. Listen, I was in a casino just the other day, right? And I saw a woman come in, and I'm not really familiar with this particular style of dress. But what it looks like, what she had on was a leotard with a see-through dress, right? And, you know, my thing is, if I'm single and I'm going out on a date, right? Going out anywhere socially, I'm sorry, but we're not going with you dressed like that. You know what I mean? You're attracting a lot of attention. You need more attention than me, then we don't need to be together. Simple as that, right? But I don't think that, and I get it, right? Men have been critiquing women for centuries, right?
Yes.
You got to dress like this. You got to conduct yourself like this, blah, 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 right? So I get it. But at the same time, we should be able to take constructive criticism. You know, if a guy gets dressed and, you know, his stuff is jacked up, right? Your woman should be able to say to you, hey, bro, look. Right. You look like Bozo. Go back in there and let me hook you up, right? And realistically, when it comes to men's fashions, right, and styling men, I think women do a much better job, right? You know, because y'all are better at putting together color coordination, stuff like that, right? You know, a guy will be out there with a red shirt, with a purple tie, with some green pants on, right? And, you know, it's the woman that says, no, baby, wait, no. Let me help you, right? So I just think that we should be able to offer each other constructive criticism and don't take it personally.
I'm just going to give it to you.
Okay.
I give the constructive criticism. If you're going out with your boys, it's whatever.
Right.
But if we going, the only way you're getting a pass is if you don't feel well.
Right.
Then I might say, okay, I'm going to give a pass today.
Right.
But if you feeling okay,
right,
I'm going to go like, we're not going to do that, right?
Right.
Are you going to change? So I think you're right. But I think that guys have to be ready for constructive criticism. But I don't want to just focus on that because I think it's so important that the women get that thing where you can't be mad. Like, we can't begin to change and fix what's broken until we stop being mad every time our man tells us, you know, what it is that they like or dislike. Or how about this? Just the truth about who they are.
Right.
Or what they want in the now. You can't, how are you going to be mad? That's the only way we're going to fix it.
Right.
So the same thing you and I were having the conversation about the angry and bitter women. It all ties in with one another. If you don't want to accept what our men are saying, you don't want to hear them, right? Then that means you're practicing some manipulation too,
Mhm.
because you just want them to go along to get along, right? And you're manipulating them by being angry or saying, "Oh, you don't love me," or "Oh, what are you trying to say? I'm fat," or "Oh, no, I'm trying to be honest with you."
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So anything outside of that, then we really not ready to heal, and we really need to heal. So I don't really think we have room for trial and error at this point.
I agree with you, right? I mean, this is
Yeah, I agree.
that has been going on for a long, long time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's just not. It just doesn't seem to be getting better, right? I think that as time goes on,
Mm-hmm.
we seem to be getting further away from our authentic selves,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And I talked about this on the way coming over. I think, well, being born in the 60s, right? I'm dating myself a little bit. I can remember late 60s, early 70s, it was the Black Power movement.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was natural,
Mm-hmm.
right? You had the afros, right? And we wore the dashikis, and we had a connection to the motherland. Okay. By the 1980s, all of that had changed.
Mm-hmm.
We lost our connection. We lost that connection, not just to the land, but to our ancestors,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And we began to change. By the 2000s, what we saw maybe late 90s, early 2000s, we saw the advent of hair weave, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a departure from our authentic selves.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is we're told subliminally, because nobody's going to come on and say, "Oh, that looks terrible," but we're
Right.
told subliminally, right? That that the hair braiding, and from my natural hair braiding,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't look good,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we begin to use chemicals to straighten our hair.
Mm-hmm.
While that's going on, then some woman named Bo Derek comes out with a movie in 1980
With
called 10.
braids.
And what is she wearing?
Cornrows.
Thank you. And you know what they said? Bo Derek invented a new hairstyle.
Can you imagine?
Right. So here we are. We're shifting away from our authentic selves, and other people are stepping in, right,
Mm-hmm.
and becoming us. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We're being replaced. And nowadays, you see sisters, and you see people with blonde hair,
Can't take it.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You see women doing the BBL, doing this, doing that. Sometimes by not even approved medical providers,
Mm-hmm.
right? There was a woman up in Washington Heights, I think it was, that was never a doctor, never medically trained. Women would come to her, and she was actually injecting them with concrete. Most of them died, right? Which kind of segues into what we want to talk about next week,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Uh-huh.
Because it would seem as if this is in response to what is perceived that men want, right? So let's be realistic. Black women are known to be voluptuous, but not every sister is going to be that way,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just genetics.
Mm-hmm.
Yet some women will try to defeat their genetic coding and go and get implants.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching a segment of Iyanla Fix My Life where there was just one sister who went and got implants. And what happened is over time, these implants began to leak. And it caused a variety of health problems and actually necrosis where the tissue actually died,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
A number of different surgeries to repair the damage, right? So I think a lot of this is in response to the perception that this is what men or our men want to see, right? And if I don't have it, then he's going to look elsewhere,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that we really need to delve into that next week.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, as we discussed, yes, I believe that Black women are very angry, very frustrated, and very bitter. And I think that they have an absolute reason to be, right? And I mean, I could go down the list of why Black women would be angry. And not just Black women. I think women in general are angry with men. I'm talking about women of all shades, all shapes and sizes. Why? Because in this country, the average white woman, right? The average Caucasian woman didn't have the right to vote until 1920.
Mm.
Mm.
There were times in history in this country where white women were treated like furniture.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's nice to look at and you move it around the room, but it doesn't have a voice, right? No one asks your opinion. No one wants to accept your intellectual capacities and abilities, right? Up until the 1970s, in some places, a woman couldn't open a bank account or have a credit card without permission of her husband. So, yes, I believe there's a lot of frustration that women have toward men in general. But I think for Black women, they have a lot of anger and resentment, in particular, Black men. And again, for very good reason. We're going to get into that next week, right? And hopefully Renee will go and lay on the couch and get some therapy.
I'm going.
So she
Yeah.
at the table angry.
Right. Because I think,
Yeah.
because I tell you, I definitely struck a chord, right?
Mm-hmm.
Her voice went up like 4 or 5 octaves, right? And she was like, I wasn't mad till I talked to you, so, but in order to fix a problem, sometimes you need to tear the scab off,
Mm-hmm.
and it's painful,
Mm-hmm.
right? But healing begins from within and works its way out. So sometimes you need to tear that scab off, and sometimes you just gotta voice the frustration, voice the anger, and it will explain the bitterness, right? And let men hear it.
And then
Mm-hmm.
comes that instrumental piece,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is much needed with all of this voicing.
Mm-hmm.
Then after you voice all these things, then be ready to listen
Right.
to what men have to say and not be sensitive, hypersensitive,
Mm-hmm.
and not
Yeah.
want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let your anger and frustration create an inability to hear the roles that we play, because there's a lot of valid stuff that we're angry about,
Mm-hmm.
but there are a lot of things that we could tweak ourselves to create better homeostasis in our relationships.
Okay.
Right?
Sorry,
So I
Miss.
think that-
Ooh, I'm sorry, Romney. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say, Miss Jane asked a question a while ago. She said, "Okay, what's a BBL? It's a Brazilian butt lift." And if I could be wrong, but I think they moved fat from another part of the area and put it into your butt. Is that what you guys believe it to be? I think that's exactly what it is, but I may be wrong.
That is my understanding of what a BBL is.
Mm-hmm.
That yes, they use fat from other parts of the body to inject that into the butt area.
Yeah.
To make the butt appear larger.
Mm-hmm. And I know some people now are getting it removed because they've gotten all types of medical issues and things like that. Probably because they've been going to these like botched doctors and things like that. But that's what it is. Sorry, I just want to answer her question.
No. And I appreciate you doing it. Well, I see that Jane made a comment. Why is it okay for a man to be poor, but expect the women to look a certain way? Okay. This is what I think, right? I think that women tend to be more open to a man not being physically fit, right? Because of the fact that there are more women right now, single women, than single men. I think that women now, I think that they are less likely to reject a man just because he's portly, right? I think if that man um, is kind, I think if he has a good conversation, I think if he's loving, I think that that woman is going to look beyond that. I think that for men, and you said men are visual, right?
Mhm.
The reality is, I think all of us are visual, right? All of us are susceptible to advertising, right? But yeah, I think that,
Manipulation.
yes, manipulation,
Because the advertising is manipulation.
and it is. But I think that men, because of the current situation where so many single women, that men can kind of pick and choose, right?
Yeah.
And women may not have that luxury, right? Unfortunately, and I think that again, women are more open to accepting a guy who may be portly, right? Um, it's like I was watching this show called Queen Victoria, right? I think that was the name of it. Shonda Rhimes.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Well, you watch it, right, Renee?
I haven't seen it either.
Okay. So it's the follow up to Bridgerton, right?
Okay.
And there's this one character.
Mm-hmm.
He's married to this younger woman, and this dude is a real horror story. You know what I mean? He looks like he was dead, resurrected, died again, and then they made him marry
Oh,
this woman, right? But despite the fact that he was Frankenstein warmed over, this woman loved him. She bore his children and she supported him. Whereas guys may not feel the same way, right? Because I think in the mind of a man, hey, something better is coming along, right? If I stay here long enough, right? If I stand here long enough, something better will pass by. Oh, that one was fine, but it's something much finer coming around the corner, right?
Mm.
And because of that, you find that a lot of men just aren't ready to commit, right? Because that takes you out of the rotation.
You said out of the rotation.
Out of the rotation, right? And
Out of rotation.
yeah, you out of rotation, and you don't want to be out there and have finer pass by, and all you can do is just kind of look. Because if your wife is with you, you bet not look too hard. You know what I mean? You got to give that quick glance. First, look at her to see where her head is turned. Then look, and then look right back. Hey, honey, did you see that bird that just flew by?
Ron made us feel like an old maid in 2 minutes.
Well, no, I didn't mean to do that, but
No, you didn't. I'm just joking.
no,
You're
but
right, though.
yeah, but in response to James' the question, right? Yes,
No, you're right.
I think that women just tend to be more open, right? Maybe more receptive might be a better word. Men, on the other hand, again, right, because there are so many single women, men are under the belief that, well, you know what? If I go to a bar, one don't want me to buy them a drink, I just go down to the other end of the bar.
But Ron, don't you think like sometimes when it comes to us young ladies, our mothers is partly responsible for that? Because they take us through so many emotions throughout our lives. I mean, they'll tell us, girl, if you don't, whatever you don't do, somebody else will do it for you, man. Girl, you better do this. I mean, we hear that throughout our lives all the time. Right. And even now we have social media. Well, if you go to this state, especially we hear about Atlanta, it's 30 women. And literally you hear that it's 30 women for every man. So we hear that throughout our lives. Right.
Mhm.
So we're always in this like whole thing, like this conundrum. We don't know what we should be. They say, well, be natural. Men like somebody natural. But then on the other hand, it's like what we call nappy heads. Right. So who should we be? Right?
You know what?
Who's our true identity? Because every day, and this is what I'm sorry, this is probably like a segue. What did he say?
He said, "Be a Kardashian."
Well, guess what? Even they being dragged now, right? So it's like we constantly, correct me if I'm wrong, Roman, but constantly we're ridiculed. So we don't know who we should be. Should we be natural? Should we not? Like, I mean, good. 1 minute we're praised for having our, our physique. Now we're ridiculed for it, and then we feel like we're competing against other women, and some of them we don't even know who we're competing with.
I think that this goes back to what I said before, Renee, where you gotta like feel good about yourself first. So to me, if I like a natural look, then I'm going to stay natural, and the men that are into a natural look, they'll holler, right? Or if I want to not be natural, then I won't be natural. And the men who are interested in the fake plastic women, they'll holler. So I think that you really just have to reach a place where you feel good about yourself. And then, in defense of the men, notice I'm doing a lot of defending the men these
Thank
days.
you.
I'm getting
I do it all the time, but I know we get into it all the time about that.
Yes. So I think to defend the men a little bit, I think that automatically everybody says, oh, the men just have so many choices that they just, they don't want to commit. But I think a lot of the delayed commitment, because they'll commit,
right?
But I think it's delayed commitment, right? I think a lot of the delayed commitment is because I think that men have a lot of the same fears and insecurities and stuff that women have.
Absolutely.
And we just don't want to acknowledge that that they do. And the older I get and the more I watch guys, and then my sons now are not teenagers, they're men now. Right. So I'm looking and watching them, and then them coming to talk to me about different things about women, right? I'm saying, wow, really? Did you really think that? So I'm discovering that men have some of the same insecurities and are afraid oftentimes to be vulnerable the same way we are. The person that I'm in a relationship with, it hurts him to be vulnerable. It comes out every once in a while, and then I'm like, look how you did it. But it takes nothing away from how he feels about me. But again, going back to what you said, you have to know your audience, right? So knowing the audience is knowing or understanding how they'll respond. And if you know the audience, then you'll know and understand that they might not respond the way the general population responds.
Right.
Individual, unique people, and you have to allow people to be their authentic selves. And then you probing and pulling back the layers on that bitter and angry woman, or on that guy who's really apprehensive about being vulnerable. After you start peeling back the layers, you'll discover that all the things that you were looking for, they're there. You just got to find them. They're not just giving them away. So,
and Renee, to answer your question about who you should be, there's an African proverb that says, "Know thyself." Right?
Oh yeah.
And if you know yourself, and I mean truly know and understand yourself, those questions don't really come up, right? I think that for a woman, right, and you mentioned like a woman entering the room and she just gives off a certain energy, right? If that woman knows who she is, when she walks in that room, men just respond to the feminine energy.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
I'm talking about men. Right? I'm not talking about this new version of men that aren't really sure exactly what they are. But for real men, you respond to the feminine energy.
The masculine energy.
Right. And
masculine energy connects with the feminine energy.
Right.
Boom, it's balanced.
Right.
Yes. The reason why I asked that question is because I hear it all the time, especially when being on different social media platforms, women ask these questions all the time. I know for me, it took me a long time to say, you know what, this is who I am. I'm falling into this bucket and that is it. I'm not swaying. I did that in my early 30s. I'm like, nope, I just can't be everyone else because I'm going to start my own show. And that's just it. Either you're going to like it or not. This is who I am, because it becomes too complicated to try to be someone else and try to fit into everyone else's mold about who they think you should be. And you're right. Just be you. That's it.
Yeah, because, you know, again, that masculine energy is going to recognize the feminine energy, right? But a lot of times, like we talked about peeling back those layers, right? Okay. So if you meet a woman, right, who has gone through so many changes, eventually you come to realize that she doesn't know who she is, that she's completely lost. And as you start peeling back these layers, you find that there's like multiple personalities of who she is, because, you know, she's trying to be everything for everybody and trying to please and all these other things, that she doesn't know who she is. She's completely lost herself, right? So it becomes difficult to be in a relationship with one person who has 49 different personalities, right? Who one day they come to the table and their hair is blonde, the next day is blue, and you know, what are we doing here?
Oh, God,
what are we doing here, right? You know, it's so important to know who you are, because it's so easy to get lost in our society. You know what I mean? It's so easy. So I just think that, you know, you just need to know who you are, right? And I think one mistake women make, and this is a mistake that they make very often, when women have a question regarding men and how men think and how men feel about different things, the mistake they make is they're going to talk to another woman. How is she going to answer that question for you?
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
If you have men in your life, talk to them, right? Hold a conversation with a man, because I don't expect a woman to know how a man thinks and how a man feels. Just like don't expect me to know how a woman thinks and how a woman feels. So if I need to know about a woman, I'm going to ask a woman. You know, a guy's going to give you information based on his perception, his experience. But a lot of times out of 10, it's wrong. You know, go to the source. If you want to know about a man, ask a man. And try to find a man that's going to be honest and forthcoming with you, right? And will give you true answers and not just what you want to hear.
And be ready to listen.
Right.
Be ready to listen. That I just can't, for the ladies, be ready to listen. Because when we get to that place where we're really ready to listen, that's where we're going to start to be able to relinquish some of that angry, bitter stereotype that, you know, they've created about Black women. Because some of it is valid, right? And then some of it is just because we don't want to listen. We're stuck in our ways and we don't want to listen. And
that's difficult in our society. We don't listen to each other anymore. We talk at one another, but not to one another. And I think Jane has another comment, right? And she said that her mom told her how to have a happy, or the ingredients of a happy marriage. I'm kind of paraphrasing. And it says, be a chef in the kitchen, be a lady in the living room, and a prostitute in the bedroom. Okay, you know what? I think your mom is right.
Hello.
Right? You know, if it worked for your mom, it's probably advice she got from her mom. And if it worked for them, yes. People have not changed that much, right? I think what happens is, and we talked about this on the way here, over time, right, the newness of the relationship wears off, right? And it's like a piece of jewelry. You gotta have this piece of jewelry, and you buy it. And after a couple of months, you put it in the jewelry box, right? It doesn't have the same value anymore. So with a relationship, it has to be a constant renewing, right? Whatever you have to do in the bedroom, you know, if people hear like jungle noises coming from your bedroom, if that is what works, right? If that's what works, then continue to do it. If both of you are happy and both of you are being satisfied, then you do whatever you have to do. And I think that one last thing I will leave you with, and that is that I think that people, particularly couples, need to learn how to argue, right? We don't. So what happens is we get mad and we just say whatever comes to mind, right? Well, it's like firing a shot. Once that bullet leaves the gun, you can't call it back,
No.
right? And sometimes it leads to death.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you say things that will lead to the death of your marriage or your relationship. So I think we need to learn how to argue, to sit down and address not everything, but the issue right now that is causing tension. We need to address that issue right now, right? Don't let it fester. Let's talk about this right now before things go too far and the relationship ends. So, I think maybe we should tell about next week, right? Okay. So, next week, we're going to talk about, well, I'm going to ask a question, and I hope, ladies and men will join in on the conversation. The question for next week is, are women angry with men in general? But are Black women angry with Black men in particular? And if so, do they have valid reasons to be angry? So we're going to talk about that next week, right? So for those of you that are listening, please listen in next week. Call in and share your thoughts and opinions with us, because this is a conversation that we have to have. And I think that it's important, vitally important for men to listen, because women have been silenced in our society, right? And sometimes when women speak up, we use 5-letter words to describe them, right? As if you're supposed to be like the furniture, just sitting there, right? But not have an opinion. So I think that men need to hear why women are frustrated, why they're angry, what happened, right? So that's going to be next week. And hopefully Renee will be able to join us. And hopefully Romane will be here. All right. So we are going to talk about that next week. So please share this information with your friends, others who may listen, and please join us next week, because next week we're going to get real deep. Yeah, we're going to talk about, it's going to tear the scab or the scab off of, or the scab rather, off of some wounds, and some things are going to come up, right, that really need to, because some people go through life and don't get to express the anger and frustration that they feel. And we just see this person angry, but don't know why, right? So we're going to talk about that next week, and we hope to see you again.
Peace.
Peace out.